Rafer Johnson interview, Black Champions, take one, roll 306, sound 304.
Rafer Johnson, I wonder if we could begin this talking about your high school career. You had a rather phenomenal high school athletic career, and you started out as a football player before you got into track and field. Tell us about those years.
Well, as a youngster, I was raised in a very small community in Central California. The name of the town is Kingsburg, and the population was only about 2,500 when we moved to Kingsburg back in the mid-40s. And all of the young people in that community were given opportunities to participate in all kinds of sports. I think their idea, the people in the town's idea, was that give all the young people an experience in a variety of sports. And I, like all the rest of them, took that opportunity. And of course, the season always begins with football, so that's where I started. But I ran track also. I played basketball and also was on the baseball team. It was very fortunate for me that I had that kind of beginning, because I really think it built a tremendous base for me and many of the other kids in the community from which they could launch a career in most any sport.
You had the experience of seeing Bob Mathias compete in a decathlon, and apparently that inspired your interest in that particular event. I wonder if you could tell us about it.
Well, it did. Again, Kingsburg is right in the center of the state of California, in the central San Joaquin Valley. And at Fresno State, we had Dutch Warmerdam, who was a world record holder in the pole vault. Bob Mathias was just 25 miles away in Tulare, California. The climate being what it was, with young people being outdoors all the time, it led to young people being involved in all kinds of sports. But Bob won the Olympic Games in '48 and 1952, and of course all the young people in the valley knew about Bob Mathias, and I had the honor of going down and seeing the Olympic trials in 1952 with my coach. And on the way back, we began to discuss about the possibilities of my entering that particular event. And as it turned out, I traditionally would compete in 5, 6, sometimes 7 events during the course of a single track meet. So in order to go in the decathlon, all I had to do was add about 3 or 4 more events. So he was not only inspiration to all of us, but we watched the film and we learned a lot about the decathlon from Bob Mathias.
What about the decathlon did you find particularly attractive as opposed to the other sports you were competing in and excelling in at that time?
Well, I started out as a high jumper and a sprinter. And in Central California in those years, those 2 events were loaded with some tremendous athletes. Not that the other events weren't. But I came head to head with some of the best athletes in the state, seems like every weekend. And so I'd gotten a real good background in those events. And my coach thought all along that I was a better hurdler and a long jumper. So we decided, when I started thinking about the decathlon, to get some additional work in those events. And as it turned out, those were my better events. The long jump and the 110-meter high hurdles and the low hurdles. With the addition of those 2 events, I began to then work on the javelin, which in those days was not an event in the school track meets. Began to work on my shot and my discus, and it was a very short period of time before we felt like I was ready to compete in my first decathlon.
What's your favorite track event to watch?
Most people who have not competed in a track meet of this sort or events of this sort know that decathlon is a grueling event. Does that mean it's grueling physically? Is it difficult emotionally? What is the grueling element of it?
It's a little bit of both of those things. It obviously wears you down mentally. It's a tremendous physical test. Anytime you've got to mix 10 different track and field events in the course of 2 days, I mean, you're talking about using different sets of muscles. You're talking about reacting to sometimes the problems in each of those events, and maybe not in each and every one, but somewhere along the way you're going to hit one and you're not going to do your best in. You're not even going to come close. Whereas some of the others that maybe has been traditionally a weaker event, you'll do very well. So that was one reason I liked it. You had to approach one event at a time. You couldn't be doing the 100 meters and thinking forward to the 1,500 meters. You had to do one event at a time. You had to react to that event. You had to finish it. You couldn't think back on that event, and you couldn't look forward to the next. You had to do exactly what you were doing at the time. And I think that that was one thing that attracted me to that event. And I full well knew that no matter how much and how hard you trained, if you weren't ready both physically and mentally, you were not going to do well in that event. So it was a preparation that you needed an extensive preparation, but it was also a preparation that you knew was going to take 2 days no matter what happened. You had to be there for the 10 events. As I said before, I had competed in many of those events down through the years and felt that I had some real fine performances in those events. I began to work on them individually, began to improve, and I think that as soon as I saw that even in my weakest event, which was the pole vault, I went from something like 9 feet to 11.5 feet in a very short period of time. After working with Dutch Warmerdam up at Fresno State, I felt real good about making the choice to go into the decathlon.
How much of a role does coaching play in the preparation of an athlete for the decathlon?
Well, I think coaching is a tremendous part of what the athlete eventually accomplishes. Even on the Olympic level. You go to the Olympic Games and you think at that point there's not much a coach can do. But I tell you, without my coach in 1960, I would not have won that gold medal. 1956, I finished second. I had some injury problems, but even without my coach there, I don't think I would have finished second. They know you. They know when you look your best. They really know when you are running your best. But most of all, they know how you approach your event when you do well. And sometimes very slight, sometimes very small, but if they can spot that problem and get to you and talk to you about it, you are going to be a better performer. It's very difficult to be competing in an event and see yourself in the physical way that the coach does, and even in the mental way, because when you're under pressure, the competition is tight, sometimes you begin to think a little differently than you might think during the course of your preparation. And I just think without the coach, many athletes who have received gold medals would not have.
Is there an ideal human being for this event, for the decathlon? Is there someone you might spot in a high school class or a track club? Someone you might pick out and say, this is a guy who should be pointed toward the decathlon? What would the elements be that you look for?
Well, I think an athlete in the decathlon has to be very patient. He can't be a person who gets worried about an event, say, that doesn't go quite as well as he thought it might have gone. I think an athlete in the decathlon has to have some speed because you are dealing with some of the speed factors in your sprinting and quarter miling. I think you have to have a certain amount of stamina. I think you have to be a person who can approach the event in a fairly relaxed attitude because you do have 10 things to do, 10 different occasions for a 2-day period. And if you're not somewhat relaxed, I mean, you dissipate a lot of energies either thinking again about what you just did or what you're going to do. And if you spend much time doing that, you're not going to have the strength or the power to perform in the upcoming event.
Take two.
Rafer, in 1956, you win your first national championship in decathlon, and that's kind of a prep for the Olympic Games of that year in Melbourne, Australia. I wonder if you tell us about the first ski national championship and your thoughts about going to the 56 Olympics.
Well, actually, just prior to the national championships, we had a meet in my hometown, the decathlon. Traditionally, in those days, most communities weren't interested in decathlon unless it was an Olympic year. And the community that was the most interested would be the athlete's hometown. And Kingsburg was very interested, and they had a meet, and I did very well in that meet, which I guess indicated in a way what might happen in the Olympic trials. I went to the Olympic trials and won there. Had
Take 3.
We were talking about the That's good, Steve. We're talking about the Olympic trials of 1956.
Well, I won those Olympic trials and beat what was a pretty good field. It included a gentleman who was subsequent to become my very good friend, Milt Campbell, and in the process had one of my best performances. So I felt real good about going into those games in 1956. Once we got down to Melbourne, I had knee trouble, and I also made the Olympic team in the long jump. And after talking with my coaches, and my coach was also there, he was a trainer for the U.S. team, Ducky Drake. They thought that it might be a good idea to
Take 4.
You were saying that your coach, Elvin Drake, I believe is his name, was.
Yes, my coach Drake was also with me there in those games. He was a trainer for the U.S. team. And after some discussion, both the coaches and my coach decided it might be best that I drop out of the long jump. I'd also made the Olympic team in that event in hopes that I wouldn't have any trouble in the decathlon. But on the second jump, in the second event, the long jump, I re-injured that knee and really had problems during the course of those games. And in the decathlon, injury is one thing you have to deal with. Hopefully you could get through one of those without any large injuries, but in this case I had this problem with my knee, and I think it affected my performance somewhat there. But Milt Campbell, I thought, performed very, very well, won the gold there, and Milt had finished second in the games in 52, was now the gold medalist in 56, and I just had to go back and work harder in preparation for the games 4 years to come. But there was one thing about those games, along with the competition, that I tremendously enjoyed, and that was the fact that the opening ceremonies meant so much to so many of the people who were participating. And I think that when you talk to Olympians, including myself, the one thing that they look back on, along with their individual competition, is the fact they had the chance to participate in both the opening and closing ceremonies. Those are two moments that I think all Olympians remember.
2 years later, you participate in a meet in the Soviet Union, which is the first sanctioned meet between the Soviet Union and the United States athletes. That seems to have been a particularly exhilarating time to meet for you.
Well, it was. I was, in fact, back in my hometown working that summer, and I don't think they had planned on having a decathlon in that first meet. And early in the summer, Vasily Kuznetsov set a world record in the decathlon, and they decided to include that event. So I came back down to UCLA and started training. And when I arrived there, it was an exciting time for me. It was after, of course, 2 years after 56, and the Olympic Games were just 2 years to come, and I really wanted to do well there. As it turned out, I again had a very fine performance and beat my good friend Vasily Kuznetsov and set a new world record there. So I was back on course again and looking forward to the games in Rome in 1960. But I found the Russian people very warm. They were certainly excited about the meet, and Kuznetsov came over to me after that meet, and I think really showed me what international competition is all about. We shook hands and embraced, and he said we look forward to meeting again in 1960, which we subsequently did.
Is there a special bond between athletes around the world? Is there something particular about you? You mentioned this relationship between yourself and the Russian athlete, the Russian decathlon athlete. But there seems, for people who are outside or who are spectators, a very particular kind of relationship between athletes. Is that an illusion, or is it in fact so?
No, I think it's a fact. first of all, it's difficult to reach that level, and I think that all athletes are very aware of that. It's much more difficult to make the U.S. team, I think, much more pressure in trying to get on the U.S. team than it is competing in international competition of the Olympic Games. And I think that the athletes know that pressure, and they realize what the other individual athletes are going through. And the same is true of athletes trying to make their own individual national teams, whether it's the USSR or East or West Germany. It's a very difficult task to get on your national team. But once you're there, the camaraderie is, of course, a little less pressurized. We're there, of course, representing our countries. We, of course, want to do the best we can do. We're all hopeful of doing the best we can do at the specified time that we participate in our event. I think that each and every one of us would like to walk away from our event saying, at that moment, I was the best I could be. I had the pleasure during my competitive days of meeting some wonderful athletes. Nagalingam Mithavirasingham was a friend of mine from Ceylon, was a high jumper. Gerald Carr from England, a discus thrower, represented England. George Rabanis from Greece finished third in the pole vault in 1956. I mean, I could go on and on. My own teammates, and of course, probably one of my closest friends during my competitive career was C.K. Young from Formosa. And C.K. and I were classmates. We participated in this country, and we also, were at each other in international competition as well. And when I look back on it, I look back on not just the fact that I was fortunate in attaining some victories and winning the gold, but all of those friends I made are very, very important even today.
We're now in 1960, and this, of course, is an extraordinary Olympic year for a number of reasons. There are some exceptional athletes, Jim Rudolph, Cassius Clay, Rafer Johnson. What was that particular Olympic like for you? You obviously felt that you were in the best position to win in that year, I believe.
I was in a tremendous position, but I was a little shaky because I look back. I was also in a great position in 1956. I was the world record holder. I'd beaten everybody in the world that year, including Milt Campbell, who subsequently won. Was expected by most to win the gold in Melbourne, but I didn't. And that thought kept going through my mind. I knew I was prepared physically, I was ready mentally. I don't think that anybody from any country worked any harder than I worked, but that does not guarantee you victory in the Olympic Games. So I was just a little bit reserved in terms of going into that event. The pressure, I thought, was again on me. But I knew that I was prepared to hopefully meet any challenge. In the wings, though, was a young man that I'd competed against for a number of years, C.K. Young, and I knew that he was a very, very tough athlete, that you had to beat him in 10 events. You couldn't beat him in 6 or 7 or 8 and expect to win. You had to beat him in 10. So I knew it was going to be a very, very tough competition. But again, I knew I was ready. I approached the event with a very positive attitude and knew very well that it was going to take 10 very good performances to come out with gold in 1960.
The event that seems to bedevil a lot of decathlons is the 1500 meter run. What is so difficult about that?
I think the most difficult thing is that most decathloners are not distance runners. I would think that most of them are like myself, either sprinters or hurdlers, shorter, quicker races. And when you've gone through 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 events, and you still have to do that 1500 meters, it can't help but be on your mind. But again, you have to dispel that. You have to push it out. You have to deal with what you're doing, and hopefully when the 1500 meters come, you're strong enough to perform in a way that's going to allow you a chance to perform to the best of your ability. I think that I was as well prepared for the 1500 meters in 1960 as I've ever been prepared for any single event.
Is it because of the nature of the event that it is the last event in the grouping?
Well, yes, That's probably as much to do with it as anything, being the last event, because by the time you go through 9 events, you cannot be fresh. You are definitely tired. The humidity was in the 90% area in Rome. There's a tremendous archives. I don't know if you know about that.
No, I don't.
But in Southern California, if you're going to research athletics,
Black champions, camera roll 308, sound roll 305, take 5.
We're talking about the 1960 Olympics. Before we go any further into the Olympics, you had an injury before the Olympics. You were in an automobile accident. Were you at all concerned that the performance was going to be affected?
yeah, that did enter my mind. I think anytime you've been injured in sports, and I had been in 1956.
Good. Speed. Hit it.
Take 6.
Get the reflector back. In 1959, the year before the 60 Olympics, you were in an automobile accident. Were you all concerned about the injuries that you received? Were they still with you, or what was the situation?
Well, of course, when I first received the injury, I was quite concerned because, of course, in 1956, I had the problems I had there, and you really don't want to go into a competition with any kind of injuries because anything can happen during the course of the event itself. I had had those injuries and had worked long and hard in a rehabilitation program with my coach and trainer, and felt that when those games came around, I was physically ready. I thought in 1960, I was in probably as good a physical shape as I've ever been in my life. I'd worked pretty hard, and of course I had C.K. Young there every single day. We worked together week in, week out, and when I got to those games, I felt that I was ready.
Was the atmosphere of Rome in '60 any different, or any substantial difference between that Olympic and the previous one in Melbourne?
I think the games in Rome were much more colorful. I think the city itself and the people did so much to welcome those athletes. Not that the people in Melbourne didn't, but you know, when you're in Europe and the Italians and all the things they do to put on a real special show, I think that we, all of us who took part in those games, were looking forward to the competition. Also in those games, you mentioned Wilma Rudolph and Muhammad Ali, and I got to know those people very well during those games, and they were special and added a lot to that occasion. Not just their friendship, but what they brought to their particular specialties. They're two special people.
You were selected to be the flag bearer at the 60 Olympics. Was that something you'd look forward to? Were you surprised?
I was very much surprised to be chosen captain. I think that anyone who gets that has to be surprised, because I don't think they telegraph that at all. It's they come to you a day or two before the event and say, you know, you've been elected the captain, and you know, would you like to carry the flag? And I don't think I know of anyone who has not agreed to do that. I was very much surprised, very pleased, and I really feel that took some of the pressure off. When I felt that the people, you know, believed in me enough that they'd want to make me the captain of the team, then that gave me a little extra boost. So I was even more ready than I had been 2 or 3 days before they came to me and asked me to do that.
In the 1960 decathlon, is there an event, is there a moment that stands out in your memory? Was there anything particularly special about that competition?
Well, for me, it was special. There were several things that happened. First of all, the fact that I was chosen captain to carry the flag. My coach, Coach Drake, was there. He was actually coaching, though, C.K. Young. He was the coach for the Formosan team. So that was special to have my coach there in the stands, and you know, we could talk to him in the evenings, and even sometimes during the breaks we'd get a chance to have a small conversation. So both CK and I felt very much at home there because we had our coaches, our coach there with us. Coaches, actually his coach was my coach. CK, by the way, also carried his country's flag. So I think that we were both looking forward to the competition. When it started, Kuznetsov, of course, was there. And Kuznetsov and CK and I had exchanged a world record 6 or 7 or 8 times during the course of the previous 4 or 5 years. And so we all knew that the competition was going to be very, very tough. So when you go into an event like that, knowing full well what to expect, sometimes the pressure that you are carrying is really a little less of a burden because you know that no matter what happens, you've got to be at your very best in order to come out the champion. I think the only thing that happened during the course of that event was in the pole vault. I was having some particular problems with my vaulting, with how I was holding my hand or my approach, and CK came over and helped me with that event and straightened me out, and I had one of the best vaults that I'd had in Olympic competition. And probably the only other thing that came to mind was the 1,500 meters itself, because when I got to that point, as we talked about before, it is a tough event. It's one that we don't look forward to doing. And when I got there, I had to run well. It wasn't just another event, because at that point I was not more than 150 or 75 points ahead of CK Young. So that meant I had to run a very good race. In fact, if he beat me by 10 or 15 yards, he could in fact been an Olympic champion. So I had to run a good race, which I was most fortunate to do. He beat me by about 2 strides. And with that performance, I was able to become the Olympic champ in 1960.
When you reflect upon your decathlon career, your career as an athlete, your career as a champion, how would you finish the sentence that began with the words, "to be a champion"? And if you would say those words for us and complete that sentence.
Well, I think, to me, to be a champion, you should always be dealing with being the best that you can be. I mean, you can never be satisfied with being anything but the best you can be. But also, to be a champion, you have to be a person or an athlete who reacts to adversity in a positive way. Because there is never a competition. I have never gone through a decathlon where somewhere during the course of that competition I didn't have to react to something that happened to me that wasn't very positive. Either an injury, a poor start, a poor finish, hit a hurdle. It becomes a very, very difficult situation. In fact, I think back now, and the question you asked me before about some things that happened to me during the course of that last decathlon. Well, in the hurdle race, I ran probably the worst hurdle race in all of my life. I ran something like 15.3 or 4, and I can run that in practice, but I did that in the Olympic Games. And at that point, CK Young moved back in front by over 100 and 150 points. Again, a little adversity, not much, but I think that when you're thinking about being the champion, your reaction to things like that have to be positive. You have to figure out a way to come back in the next event to do better than you've ever done before, because you've just run as poorly as you ever have. So I would say, to be a champion, you react to adversity in a positive way.
Good. I'm rolling. Steve, hit it.
Take 7.
Wait for
Your
me now.
reflections on being the torchbearer in the 1984 Olympics.
Well, I had been one of 50,000 volunteers. Was selected by Peter Uberoth to carry the torch. Actually, I'd been in New York. I transferred the flame from the urn from Greece to the first torch in New York, which was run by Gina Hamfill and Bill Thorpe. Is that bothering us?
Speed. Speed, hit it. Quick sticks.
Take 8.
I'd been in New York and had transferred the New York and had transferred the flame from the urn that came from Greece to the first torch, which was carried by Gina Hemphill and Bill Thorpe. I subsequently ran a leg in Dallas and was thrilled on July 28th to be the person chosen by Peter Uberoth to carry the torch, the final leg, to light the torch that was to burn over the stadium, the Coliseum, for the 23rd Olympiad. I still can't yet put in words how I felt. One of 50 1,000 volunteers who'd worked months, weeks, 5 years to make the games a success. And to be the person chosen was, needless to say, one of the highlights of my athletic career. To have competed in 1956 and 1960, and then 24 years later to be as involved in the games as that was a moment that I'll never forget.
Who would you like for me to do a video on next? What are your thoughts about this video? Please share them in the comments. Please be honest when answering these questions. Share this video with anyone you deem necessary. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.